an experience with this, haven't you?
Yes, I did. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I did. So I'd like to share some of my experiences from the 90s and until present. And at the end of it, there's a question as well for you. I'd like to get some insight, given your experience. Now, my experience stems back to the early 90s. I was at the London School of Economics as well. And at that time, Hizb ut-Tahrir, which was headed by Omar Bakr Mohammed at that time, used to cause a lot of problems.
I remember it well.
Yes. Their tactics of intimidation, etc. And in parallel, separately, there was a guy called Ahmed Omar Sheikh, who too was at the LSE, a very outstanding student. He won an award for saving a woman's life. And then he joined the Mujahideen in Afghanistan after he was disillusioned with what was happening in Bosnia. And I do remember speaking with him at the basement, at the mosque of the LSE, where he did try to recruit me to join the Mujahideen. But he's in jail now, I think, in India on terrorism charges. So, there is definitely a lost generation. Now, moving further on...
Can I just stop you there a moment and just, Hassan, just to tell you that I know exactly who you're talking about. The man, Omar Sheikh, was at the LSE. I was at the conference, the very conference which... the trial, because you're right, he is convicted. I think he's in Pakistan in jail. He's been convicted of beheading Daniel Pearl, the journalist.
Yes, that's right.
The Wall Street Journal journalist who was beheaded in Pakistan. This is an LSE student from Britain, a British Pakistani. Now, the reason I wanted to stop you is that in the transcripts of the trial, it transpired that where he first got radicalised was when Omar Bakr Mohammed went to the LSE and gave a speech on the genocide in Bosnia at a conference. And Omar Sheikh felt frustrated at Hizb ut-Tahrir because he said, you're talking about the need for a caliphate, but you're all talk, you don't do anything. And from that conference, he decided to take direct action and became a jihadist instead. I was at that very conference, and I remember the speech that Omar Bakri gave. And another interesting twist to this is that, obviously, I've turned my life around since then. I've been working against extremism for 8 years. The last person to see Daniel Pearl alive was another Western Pakistani by the name of Asra Normani. She was his friend. She was the host, his fixer, in fact, in the city of Karachi before she bade him farewell, without knowing, of course, that he would be walking off to his murder. He thought it was an interview. Well, I'm now very close to Asra Normani. She and I work together in the United States. She's a partner with my work to challenge extremism. And it's fascinating to me that you remember that time because, as I said earlier, some of our brightest minds have been lost to this scourge of Islamist extremism. And here's an example. Omar Sheikh was at the LSE and he ended up beheading someone.
That's right. And I was, because at that time I too was frustrated with what was happening in Bosnia. And Omar actually said, well, there is something you can do. You get training, and there's no harm getting trained. And I could see how he was actually trying to recruit, because what he said was, you can get trained, but you don't have to join the Mujahideen. So it's a good skill to have. Fine. So obviously, when you do get trained, then obviously you are going to be brainwashed. But one thing that really did concern me, and that's the reason why I didn't join, was he said two things. Firstly, if you do go training, you can lie to your parents that you're going on holiday. And secondly, he said that in the war against the Soviet Union, it was Islam that actually won, which it wasn't. It was American-made Stinger missiles. But the crucial thing is, he said you could lie to your parents, and as you and I know, lying to your parents, especially at something big as that, is a no-no, completely un-Islamic. So, moving on into...
Hassan, just to ask you, obviously, again, just to fresh the views, Omar Bakr Mohammed was at the time the leader of Hizb ut-Tahrir, but he went on to found Al-Muhajirun, which is the group that Anjum eventually led in the UK, because Omar Bakr Mohammed was eventually, not allowed to re-enter. He's a Syrian cleric. He's currently in jail in Lebanon. He was not allowed to re-enter the United Kingdom because of his extremist views. So Anjum Chaudhry succeeded this man, Omar Bakr Mohammed, that you're talking about, who held that conference at the LSE. And so one thing is Hizb ut-Tahrir, but what do you think of this question of the fact that we've lost an entire generation of British Muslims, and what, if anything, can we do to turn it around?
Well, what we can do to turn it around, and this comes to my second point actually, very, very nicely, was when I stood for Parliament in 2005.
Oh,
and,
snap! Except it wasn't 2005 for me.
Yes, that's right. And at that time, the Al-Muhajirun, headed by Omar Bakr, as you said, had my photo and the mugshots of the other Conservative candidates on their website, calling us kafirs. So I issued a challenge.
Just explain what kafir means for the listeners.
Yeah, it means an unbeliever, and that's been taken out of context because Muslims can be kafirs, or Christianity, for example, unbelievers of the other belief we don't believe in. So it means an unbeliever. And we obviously apparently came outside Islam because we were involved in British politics. So I issued a challenge to Omar Bakri Mohammed to engage in a debate on two topics. First, did America deserve what it got? And secondly, are Muslims allowed to engage in politics? Now, 1 week before the debate was due to take place, I had a call from his spokesman that they didn't want Muslims to be seen to be arguing amongst themselves. After calling me a kafir, I'm suddenly a Muslim. The real reason is that they didn't really have an argument to stand on. And since then, although I haven't been in Parliament, I'm involved with Prevent as well, the Prevent strategy. And last year, I took part in a local debate on radio in Slough, and I was debating with someone from Cage, I think, and also from Hezb Tahrir, Ibn al-Basir, who's a lawyer as well. And they obviously slated the Prevent programme and blaming the government for all sorts of conspiracies to destroy Islam, which I don't subscribe to. I don't think there are any conspiracies against Islam per se. But I said, and here's the answer to your question, what is the way forward, is to engage in dialogue between these parties. So I've been trying very hard for the last year to have a dialogue between the Prevent officers and some of these radical groups like Hezb Tahrir, etc. Now, the interesting thing is, when I proposed this idea to the Prevent officers in Slough, they said, yep, straight away, engage in dialogue. But with Hezb Tahrir and with, I've emailed Ibn al-Basir, so I've emailed the head of Hezb Tahrir England, Abdul Wahid, no response whatsoever.
I was about to tell you I could predict the response. I know Abdul Wahid, I've known him for years, and again, he's a doctor. But Hassan, listen, I've got to stop you there, but this has been fascinating. You've given us a personal insight to your own experience at the LSE, and this really kind of backs my point up. Thank you so much for calling, and do call again. And what I'm saying is that I think we did lose some of our brightest and best of the 90s era British Muslim generation. That's people like me, those in their mid to late 30s now. Abdul Wahid, the leader of HT UK that you've just mentioned, is a GP, he's a doctor, but he's an Islamist, he's a member of an Islamist organisation. We've got others who were engineers and solicitors in the case of Anjem Chaudhry. These are minds that clearly have an ability to excel in their respective fields, and instead they are dedicating their talents to bringing about the resurrection of a theocratic modern-day caliphate.